When Credible started, what was the original idea that you were trying to solve for?
The day the first invoice happened, that was for 15 crore invoice. COVID came.
Acha.
That changed everything because now there was actually no liquidity in the system. So that's when, I started discussing this with Nirav, my co-founder at Credible. And we went from 50 pre-COVID to 1,500 crores a month post-COVID. The day you stop evolving the business, there's a problem.
In my opinion,
Yeah.
entrepreneurship is a sport. Some days you win, some days you lose. I think you're betting the company.
Betting on people's lives.
Yeah.
First, you have to accept your situation. If you're in denial, then there's, you're only going to go deeper into the rabbit hole.
11 billion in working capital annually.
Yeah.
175 corporate clients, 100 plus global financial institutions, 3.5 lakh, that's 350K small businesses, and it's over a 500% year-on-year growth. Did these numbers even come to your mind? Were they in a whiteboard somewhere when you started?
Life's a journey, not a destination. It's easier to multiply a number by 3 instead of by.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of The Money Talks. And today we have someone very, very interesting. In fact, we just found out there are a few threads of our life that actually interject. I think today's conversation is really going to be about how journeys are actually made and not built, right? Because over a period of time, you just keep having opportunities coming to you. You just have to keep saying yes and no to things, right? And I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation because the more I'm finding out about Ram, the more I'm understanding that there really isn't anything that could be said that, you could build things out. It really is the Steve Jobs, you can connect the dots looking back. Without further ado, let me introduce the co-founder at Credible, Ram Kevalramani. Ram, welcome to the Money Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Ram, let me just dive right into it, right? Before we talk about the incredible size of Credible, which is incredible actually. But I want to little bit talk about your childhood, right? You born and brought up in Mumbai.
My dad was in the army.
Correct.
So I was born in Ambala, but
Acha.
spent majority of my life in Bombay.
Okay.
Um,
You're a Saint Marian.
I'm a St. Marian. So my childhood was very interesting because my dad was in the army and he was a sportsman.
Acha.
My mother was also, athletically gifted, but also, focused a lot on academics. So she was a professor at the Bombay University.
Wow.
So it's an interesting journey where...
Two very strict people, I can imagine.
No, actually not. So my father was, so sports was a big driving force when we were growing up. There was a lot of push into culture, so into, various kind of music, genres of music, into food, what the background of food is from a global point of view.
Interesting.
So when we grew up, our parents taught us a very global perspective, which, at a time when television or travel was not really prevalent, gave us a really interesting outlook.
Wow. And after St. Mary's, you went to HR and you did your undergrad. So you did your junior college over there, and then your BCom.
That's correct,
right?
BCom and HR.
HR.
Yeah.
And then after that, you joined. What was the journey from there into banking?
So, interestingly, during my entire 5 years in HR, which was junior as well as BCom, I was always working. So I did internships for 5 years.
Really? Wow.
And this ranged from companies that were card reading, online card reading companies to online tire trading companies to investment banking firms.
Wow.
In India as well as in Singapore. So I did a lot of these, working stints during my college days. And I made a few connects during the way. And one of those connects was, there were a bunch of investors who were looking to buy out a packaging company, which was in BIFR. And the idea behind that was to, buy it, turn it around, make it profitable, and ideally flip it, right? So I was involved immediately post my college days into restructuring of that packaging company based in Silvassa. So that journey was interesting because I spent about 2 years in Silvassa by myself in an unknown territory.
This is when Silvassa was not what it is today.
Nothing, there was nothing over there. I remember doing midnight checks and, had to be careful because there'd be snakes and pythons going across. It was interesting. it is that kind of experience that gave you a view into how a business is run, from an operation point of view. Then you go and you understand how to sell that product. So you do sales. So it was a fabulous experience at that time.
What did you take away from that experience, especially 2003 factory, BIFR, right?
Yeah.
Lots of issues. This is obviously when India was not what it is today in terms of, I mean, we can still call it slow, but compared to then it was.
I think it was an amazing journey, right? Because at that point in time, straight out of college, you're saying, okay, do I do an MBA? What do I
Right.
do? Right? And this opportunity came, and the way I looked at it is saying that this is real life practical experience.
Correct. This is a practical MBA.
This is
put
a
it that way.
practical MBA.
Yeah.
So when I went there, you're dealing with people who you do not know. They are, it was a large, major labor force over there. Dealing with them, trying to make sure that they are, and there was a transition from the old owner to the new owners. So their loyalty factors was obviously towards the old
Correct.
owners. How do you win that across? How do you change the mindset from a chalega attitude to, let's count everything, let's measure everything.
Correct.
So I think that was a interesting experience, which nobody can teach you.
I think those are really the kind of experiences that shape your worldview, but they also give you a lot of respect for that journey, right?
Yeah. So that was my first real job, full-time job. And I think it was a fabulous experience. Like I said, I was sitting 2 years by myself, and you had nobody to talk to, right? No friends, nobody,
Of course.
right? You're just
And this
there
is
alone.
like on mobile phone calls were really expensive. at
Really
that-
expensive, right? So you're like having a conversation by yourself, trying to entertain your very existence. So it was an incredible experience.
And I noticed that after that, I don't think you did an MBA.
No, I did not.
Wow.
So once we successfully turned around that business, I then met somebody who was starting off a boutique investment banking firm. And given that I had done investment banking stints in my internship, I decided to, do this as a change. And this turned out to be really interesting because it was a boutique. It gave you the opportunity to think and execute by yourself.
Right.
So it allowed you to think outside the box, and there was nobody curtailing your thought process. So I really love that. You're winning. You're actually going pitching for your own clients. You're trying to place them. So that was a great experience. Great bunch of guys who we worked with.
Any IPOs you were a part of? Or
No, so we did a couple of interesting deals. The first deal that I did in that was Mahesh Tutorial, which eventually did go for an IPO, and the investors did get
like a
successful
primary or a
exit.
secondary transaction?
This was a primary and a secondary
Acha.
on the IPO side. On the investment side, it was a pure primary investment
Okay.
by Helix Investment. That was interesting. And then Lehman Brothers happened, and luckily, because we had a great pipeline and stuff like that, we spoke to Centrum Capital and we kind of merged in. So that's how my journey then went to Centrum Capital, and then so that was it. I think Centrum was there for 3 odd years, then joined Grant Thornton.
What was that moment like in the the great financial crisis, as they call it?
It
was
was
2005.
Yeah. It was so interesting, right? Because everybody you would speak to was only talking about how everything is doomed,
Doomed. Yeah.
right? So you're like, okay, I've just got married, everything is getting doomed. That's not cool.
And that too, you're in banking. I think
Yeah,
that,
so
that
it's-
had massive cuts happen.
Everything was impacting what we
Yeah.
are trying to do, right? So, in fact, if I remember correctly, we had Lehman Brothers last term sheet before the collapse actually happened.
Acha.
So that is quite interesting on that side of it. So that was a lot of uncertainty over there.
Yep.
But like I said, then you moved to Centrum, stayed there for about 3 years, then shifted to Grant Thornton because
Right.
they were trying to set up an investment banking,
And then you
outfit
just
over
decided,
there.
okay, I'm going to leave all of this and do something completely different.
No, actually, it was not that random a thought.
Acha.
So during my Grant Thornton days, one of the things that I was looking to do was consolidate a people logistics industry
Okay.
because that industry was interesting. it was you had a lot of mom and pop shops,
Right.
and only one or two real large players. So there was a massive opportunity to go and consolidate that. Now, during that point of time, I met with a promoter who had got himself into a debt trap
Ah, okay.
because, like all financially sound
well, money
entrepreneurs
was
in
flowing
India,
at that time, right?
they took short-term working capital, put it into real estate because real estate was a booming thing at one point of time. That got
Fell
tied up, so
apart.
he got himself into a debt trap. So I partnered with a private equity firm, bought that business out,
Acha.
and ran it as a CEO. And the whole idea behind that point of time was that so Premier was essentially a B2B car rental business targeting large corporates in India. It was a Hyderabad-based company, so the opportunity was there to use that platform and expand to other cities,
Right.
as well as start a B2C way. Now you're talking about 2012, 13, when you really did not have an Ola and Uber over
Yeah.
here. So there was a massive opportunity to actually do that. Interestingly enough, the due diligence that we did around that business was flawed. So when we entered the business, instead of a growth concept, you again went back into a restructuring play, right? Because you had to manage all the holes that were not covered during
Yep,
diligence. So that was another interesting learning experience from my point of view.
Wow. So this is like entrepreneurship through acquisition almost, right?
Yeah, I
Like
mean,
an ETA.
yeah. So you go into something, you go into do something, but something else pops out. But you learn to adapt to the situation. You try and figure out what best to do. So we sat there from, I've had, because of mismatched cash flows. You had vendors sitting on top of your head. I've had guns being pointed at me.
Seriously?
Yeah. It's,
Wow.
it was a wild, wild west in Hyderabad. So, how do you come out from that?
Correct.
Right? You
But
take a
before I
step
get there, I
back.
want to ask you, Ram, because I think it's very critical. Because today a lot of M&As are happening.
Yeah.
Startups are acquiring startups, and there's a new concept called entrepreneurship through acquisition,
Yeah.
really taking off.
Yeah.
I think very nascent stages, but globally it's taken off in a big way. So anybody who's acquiring a business, like you said, there were some things that due diligence that were missed out,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sure you must have hired the best of consultants.
Yes.
Because you had access to all of them as a banker for such a long time. What do you think was the error that was made, and how do you think if you had to do it again, what would you change?
So I think I think the error was part fraudulent, part missed by the accounting firm.
Acha.
So it was a combination of two, I would think. If you have founders who are willing to do fraud, they'll find ways to get across that. So there's nothing that you can really do about that, to be honest with you. I think there were a couple of stupid mistakes that the accounting firm could have done to double check facts, which did not happen. And we took it as face value. And hence, the balance sheet was, it was completely lopsided. So you had more payables than receivables, as opposed to the picture, which was more receivables than payables. So
Okay, got it.
so that was the hole in the gap that we had to fix.
Wow.
So that's where we landed up with that situation.
And then later on, when these issues started cropping up, where you had more
Yeah.
payables and receivables, right? And guns are getting pulled out.
Yeah.
Right? How do you deal with that, right?
So there are two ways to do it. I could have easily packed my bags, come back to Bombay and said, this is not my, I'm out of here.
Yeah, correct.
Or the other way was saying that, okay, let's take a step back. What can we do to fix this? And that's the approach that we took. We took a step back saying, okay, there's too much clutter happening over here. So let's take a step back, declutter the situation. Let's look at the business full, right? So you had a business which had assets, which were your vehicles, in one hand. So we said, okay, can we make this from an asset-heavy business into an asset-light business?
Interesting. Yeah.
Right? Because then you're taking away all the fixed costs associated to the business. So we, and we executed really, really fast, right? Within a span of literally 15 days, we got rid of all the assets.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
Really fast. So you suddenly took the clutter away from maintenance to fixed costs, people shafting you on various costs, right? That suddenly disappeared. So then you have one less headache to think about.
Correct.
Then you're saying, okay, the reality is the gap in the balance sheet is there. So you actually go back to your vendors and say that, okay, I know I owe you 100,
Hmm.
but this is the situation that we find ourselves in. So I need a longer time to pay you off. So those are the kind of conversation that real life conversation that you have. You have a lot of people who are with you, a lot of people who are not with you, but you learn to deal with it, and that was interesting, right? At the same time, you had the people in the business, your employees, who are their motivation levels are also zero,
course.
right? Nobody wants to get abused for a living. So how do you pull everybody with you?
I want to talk about this because I think every business,
Yeah.
fortunately, and maybe even by the DNA of being in a business, there are up cycles and down cycles. What I realize is that
Anybody
and
who says anything other than that is
it
not
doesn't know
no
what you're talking
reality.
about. Absolutely, and I feel ki because our generation, in some way, we came from an era where you had to stand in line at VSNL to get a 500 rupee recharge, right? For getting 50 MB of data, which was at some 512 kbps.
Yeah.
I don't think people even understand what 512 kbps is, but when you pressed yahoo.com and you pressed enter, yes, yahoo.com, Google wasn't around. You could actually think faster than the page was loading, right?
True.
But this is the era we came from, and we realized that I think in some ways we were okay, or we were just accepting of things not working.
Yeah.
Or of like you applied for a job, didn't get through, or you applied for a college, did not get through.
Yeah.
I think, and therefore in entrepreneurship, somehow I feel that because you've been through that journey of India's transition from what effectively was a socialist economy to where we are becoming more and more capitalist today, it's something that I feel ki we are okay with maybe dealing with failures better. Like, having a conversation about I can't pay you.
Yeah.
Right? It's a tough conversation. It's a
Yeah,
very tough
ask
one,
me,
right? But I feel ki we today tend to shrug that responsibility, then deal with it face on.
Yeah.
And I really wanted you to talk a little bit about, what it takes to sit in front of someone and say, you know what, I failed.
Yeah.
I understand I failed. And it's going to affect you.
Yeah.
Right? But I am now going to sit in front of you and explain to you,
Yeah.
right, how we're going to fix this and why do I need your help?
Yeah.
Because the guy says, hey, I've already, or the guy or person who gave you the money, guy or girl, but I already gave you 100 rupees, right? Now you can't pay me back, but you're now asking me for help, which in effect is what entrepreneurship is all about. Can I still convince you that help me out here? I just need a little bit more time and I'll get you through.
Yeah.
Right? What did it take?
So one is, first you have to accept your situation.
Perfect.
Okay. I mean,
acceptance of the fact.
If you're in denial, then there's, you're only going to go deeper into the rabbit hole. So first you have to accept, okay, this is the situation I find myself in. The moment the acceptance is there, then it's about being honest. You can't bullshit your way through this scenario. Because if I go to somebody and ask, bullshit my way through, I'll get caught 3 days later.
Correct.
So you're only pushing your pain value on a temporary basis.
Deal with the issue head on.
Deal with the issue head on. It's tougher, but and people then get you. If they believe the intention is correct, people are with you.
Yeah.
But if they believe that you're out to screw them over, they will never be with you.
Absolutely.
So I think
agree with that.
So I think that's.
And again, we over here in your situation is a difficult one, but sometimes you also may have a client situation where you promise something, you can't get it done on time.
Absolutely.
Or you made a trade, it went wrong.
Overdo it, right?
Yeah.
Oversell.
Oversell. Yeah, exactly. And then or the team oversold, or you expected some vendor to give you something that didn't come on time. Everything can happen.
Yeah.
But delivering of bad news, to me, seems to be an entrepreneurial skill that is super critical.
Yeah.
Right. Like I even feel telling your employees when they've screwed up.
Yeah.
Right. We tend not to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's a very difficult conversation to be had. So we'll outsource that to somebody else. HR will take care of negative feedback. I will only give positive feedback.
Right.
But I think even that negative feedback and the ability to give it, so critical, right? Because if you can't give it, how do you?
I think you're doing a disservice to the other person.
Correct.
Because if you do not give them what reality is, how will they improve? Or how will they make adjustments?
That's so critical, having that at the back of your mind.
How are they going to improve? So nobody's telling you to be critical and be positively critical.
Yep.
So this is, and I think that's the way it works, and that's the way it should work.
Yep. No, I completely agree, and I'm glad because you had that experience very early in life,
Yeah.
and I'm sure when you're building your next venture,
Yeah.
you're now equipped with that tool, you could say,
Yeah.
or that utility belt.
Yeah.
That I can make this happen. But 5 years at Premier People Logistics Solutions.
Yeah.
Right. Started in December of 2012 and ended with you in April of 2017. What? How did you turn this around? What eventually happened to that business?
So the business is still running. I am associated with that business in a advisory capacity,
Acha.
not from a management point of view. We are present in about 15 cities
Wow.
across India. Since the time we bought over the business to today, we have revenues have increased by tenfolds. So it has grown. It is
Wow.
a profitable business.
And in an era where you've got Uber, Ola,
yeah, so
Rapido.
kept things simple, did not overcomplicate life. So it worked out. It's working out well.
Wow, interesting. And is that business now still privately held, or is
It is privately held, yes.
Oh wow.
So
So in effect, an entrepreneurship through acquisition that actually worked out.
well, not the way you wanted. We were expecting this to be 5 years earlier, but yeah, it's getting there.
Wonderful. And then along the way,
Yeah.
right? At what point did this idea of Credible come up?
Again, through Premier.
Acha.
My experience with Premier, because the logistics business is a working capital intensive business,
Yep.
right? You pay today, you get money after 90 days,
Yeah.
and that's a long. And the more you grow, the more capital you require, right? And there's only so much you can fund through equity,
Yep.
right? So, what does a business
Really?
do?
I thought every founder feels I can. VC is equal to WC.
So we went to
I meant working capital.
So, as a business, we went to all banks, all NBFCs, trying to raise some sort of working capital line, right? But the banks and NBFCs at that point of time looked at things on a very traditional approach. Show me a balance sheet. How much collateral can you give me? So now you've got rid of all your assets during the restructuring side. So you're asset light. So you have no collateral to provide. So we raised zero,
Acha.
right? So, and I found this strange. And at the same time, if you would go to some of the client sites at night, because that's when the night shifts were happening, it was very interesting. You used to go over there in the night, and you had these money lenders who would come with suitcase bags of cash, and the drivers would come with their trip sheets,
Acha.
and these guys would discount their trip sheets on real time, because those trip sheets were in a sense a billable event.
Correct.
So the client had to pay against a trip sheet, right? So it was brilliant. So I was having.
And
this,
you would notice this as the CEO of the company? I thought.
Yeah, because
why would you be standing there?
Because that's how you learn what's happening in your business.
Thank you. There was a trick question.
So that's when I started discussing this with Nirav, my co-founder at Credible, and I said it's incredible, right? Because you're sitting in a situation where I have provided goods or services to India's largest corporates, but I just cannot get a loan against that receivable,
Correct.
right? And Nirav comes from background of tech, so he had built and sold a tech business earlier. He then got into a structured trade and commodities business, so he understood global structured trade finance really well. So when we were discussing this situation, we said,
How
this
did you
has
meet
to
Neerav, by
be.
the way?
So he's incidentally my brother-in-law.
Acha. Okay.
So that's the relationship. His sister married me. He's very lucky. But so that's how we was having a conversation over drinks, and we're like, this it cannot be my problem alone.
Correct.
So, and we said, okay, this is something that's really interesting because there's clearly a gap over here. So then we started, this is in 2016. So whole of 2016 to mid of 2017 when we officially launched, it was all trying to understand the gap and the nuances of the working capital space. And we were right. It was not my problem alone. There were hundreds of businesses who just
Facing the
could
same
not
issue.
get access to working capital. How were they funding it? They go to money lenders and borrow at like
Insane rates.
exorbitantly high cost of funds, or and that's it. So that was the lacuna that we're trying to address.
So interesting. I mean, one business that you're already working in, right?
Yeah.
Just because you have attention to detail, you realize that another whole massive business opportunity which you are also facing.
Yeah.
Solving a real human problem
Yeah.
with a personal attached, situation to it. And so then, when Credible started, what was the original idea that you were trying to solve for?
The idea behind Credible was and is still, nothing has really changed from the vision point of view, is to solve for the working capital space in India and then hopefully globally. Right? So when we started off Credible, the idea was, how do we enable safe lending to the MSMEs who are not financially savvy, right? Because I've been through two experiences of bankrupt businesses because the promoters had no financial sense because they use short-term capital
Correct.
and divert cash, right? So how do you safeguard yourself from that scenario? Especially at a point in time when there was not digital public infrastructure available in 2016 and 17 to the way it's available today. So how do you do that in real time? And the idea was, can I then lend to vendors of large corporates
Correct.
against a billable event, right? Whether it is invoice or whether it is a purchase order or whether it's just a ARN, right? Good receipt note, the GRN. Can I do that? And the answer was, I can do it as long as you get a buy-in from the large corporate, right? How do you do that? So the solution that we came across to was, we built a platform, a supply chain financing platform that would sit on the ERP of the large corporate, on the anchor, and enable both receivable and payable financing for their ecosystem of vendors and dealers. And this would be financed through banks.
Got it.
Right? And the idea was from day one to also build our own NBFC to participate in this ecosystem. So that was how Credible 1.0 was.
Oh wow. And so the way it would be embedded was in the format of the small corporate or the larger corporate?
The large corporate.
Okay.
So you would go to a large anchor, plug into the ERP on one side, plug into the banking ecosystem on the other side. So now you've connected the two. You would then pull the data from their ERP. So let's take a vendor. So every time a vendor submits an invoice, it goes to the ERP. Due date is X. So against that, I can now finance this vendor in real time.
Got it. And why would the large corporate want you to have access to all this data?
So it was interesting. In the first 18 months, 12 to 18 months, it was a struggle. They asked us the same question, why do you want to do it? And our response was always to, you want to enable liquidity for your vendor. But they already have cash. No, they do not have cash. Trust me, they do not have cash, right? So it was very tough. And we, after a lot of struggle, got in a couple of anchor corporates and we were doing 50 crores a month in disbursements.
Okay. That's a big number in 18?
COVID came.
Achha.
That changed everything because now there was actually no liquidity in the system.
Got it.
Right? So vendors kept pushing and the companies for early financing and they could not manage it. Right? So that's when the corporates started realizing the need for supply chain financing in a digital way. And so we went from 50 pre-COVID to 1,500 crores a month post-COVID.
Wow.
And that transition really happened due to COVID.
Incredible.
Yeah, so COVID for us was...
But I want to talk about this first sale. I want to talk about the first 12 months because, dealing with large corporates and the fact that they will have committees and they'll have multiple, layers of approvals that are required. And what I found interesting, Ram, is that you actually went out to solve the problem of the small guy.
Yeah.
But instead of, and logically, you should have probably gone to them and sold them an ERP plugin that they should have sold to the other side. But now you went to the large guy, realizing that this is where the bottleneck is.
That's correct.
And you wanted to sell this guy. But so there are two decisions here. A, why the large guy, where that idea came from. Secondly, selling the large guy is not easy.
No, it's not.
right? Not at all easy. I
it's
mean,
very difficult.
we've both sold to large corporates,
Yeah.
and we know that there is a structure. And unfortunately, there is a lot of internal politics and internal, approvals
It
that
is.
are required.
Yeah.
Tell us how you did it, and maybe even talk a little bit about your first sale and how that felt.
So, luckily for us, we had a few, access to, few people who were chairmen of large corporates. So getting an in was not the issue. Getting that first meeting is never the issue.
Because of your previous role in Premier.
Right. And basic backgrounds, right? So we knew people who, seven dots, you'll get somewhere. So the first meeting was never a problem, right? With the largest companies. And everybody would love the idea in the first meeting. But then step 2 was dead silence.
Yep.
Right. And it used to get frustrating. So because you could not understand the corporate lethargy.
Yep.
Right. And what you did not understand is that the guy who needs to push it through has no real incentive to push it through. So the first conversion took us roughly around 12 to 13 months.
Wow. 13 months to close your first sale.
It was exhausting. But as you kept meeting more and more people, you kept harping on the same messaging that this is a requirement. It's not a great to have. It is a must have.
Yep.
That mindset change started building momentum. But the first 12, 13 months, it tires you. It makes you doubt your own self.
Yeah.
Is this something that will really sell
Makes
or
you
not?
change your pitch. You're like, maybe I should change the product.
Yeah, everything. But yeah, so that was...
and tell us the first time when you got your first approval.
Yeah.
Right. And when I'm saying approval, is this like you had already embedded the product approval, or you just got approval? Okay, we're going ahead.
No, we're going ahead.
So we're
From
going
there
ahead.
to...
There's another level of CCs that are going to happen now.
Because then you go into the tech...
Correct. I was going to say
IT side
the
of
number of CCs have just increased, right?
Correct. So, but the day the first invoice got discounted on our platform, it was amazing feeling, right? I mean,
how long was that from the time
finally
you started?
happened? Must have been 15 odd months.
Wow.
From start to finish, right? And because we were ready for this 15 months ago from an infrastructure point of view. Right, but selling, not happening. Okay, baby steps are taken. The day the first invoice happened, that was for 15 crore invoice. So it was not even a small. So that was,
and it was discounted by
a bank.
A bank. Wow.
But through our platform.
And that bank must have been waiting 15 months for an invoice.
No, the banks. It was easy for the process and the implementation from going live with the corporate was painstaking, right? Then you're basically saying, supposing I have, in January, I've gone live, the January invoice gets discounted immediately. So the banks were never really waiting. But
okay. Now, I was saying the bank must have been supplied with that tech or that idea a while back. So they were waiting 12 months for an invoice as well, right?
Yeah, but not so much. It was more us waiting than them waiting. But yeah, it was
pretty complex situation to be in, right? I mean, but sort of 15 crore invoice is now discounted.
Yeah.
First one happens, right? I'm guessing a bit of a party.
Yes.
And
big party. I think at 1:30 in the afternoon.
And then after that, what? How did it start snowballing from there? What was,
So the beauty was, see, it helps motivates the team as well.
Yeah.
When they see success happening, right? So you suddenly have these guys going, okay, this is actually happening now. The way they pushed and they onboarded vendors, just that momentum just went through the roof.
As soon as you got that first sale.
Yeah, because people see nothing beats success, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
so true.
It's brilliant. So
in fact, I think even like when my sales boss used to say that, the guy who makes the first sale just broke a belief barrier.
Yeah.
It's like the guy who ran the first 4-minute mile.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, people thought it was superhuman
Yeah.
Only gods could run faster.
Yeah.
And now even I think even the female 4-minute mile has been broken.
Yeah.
Right, which is incredible. I think now they're talking about 40-year-olds breaking the 4-minute mile, and so it's the belief barrier, right? That got broken, and suddenly there's just this incredible belief. But how are you motivating this team for 15 months? Because see, 12 months to first sale, but 15 months to real first sale, right? 15 months is an incredibly long amount of period in a startup ecosystem which was fledgling at that point, right? Today, chalo, we know how to deal with failure. I think we're getting comfortable with it. We're not completely integrated, but 15 months, how are you motivating this team? And how big was the team?
I think at that point in time, we were about 30 odd people.
30 odd people.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think the founding team was critical for us at that point of time because, see, you can't do this by yourself.
Yep.
Right? I mean, as founders, there are two of us. You can only drive so much, right? But there are other 28 people who need to get this thing, right? So the founding team was great. They believed in what we were trying to do. And they knew that we are taking the longer route, which is going on a B2B sales cycle. So they understood that it takes time. But once you convert, then it's very quick.
Yeah.
Then you embed it. Then it's unless you really screw up, it gets very difficult for you to get dislodged.
True. That itself is a moat in some ways.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it is a painstaking exercise. So luckily, we had people who understood that. So that was heartening.
And so you raised a seed round, I think, in March of 2017.
So we put in our own capital as seed. So we put in about $2.5 million of our own capital.
The seed round was a promoter-led seed capital. And your first sale then, by that effect, happened somewhere in about June of 2018.
Yeah. By that time, we got a NBFC license as well because we applied for the NBFC license on day one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So June 2018 onwards, the real momentum kicked in. You started converting a lot of corporate clients. You started, growing your NBFC business.
So the NBFC was required to bill discount the same bills, or that would go to the bank?
So the idea was if me as a vendor, I'm selling to Britannia, hypothetically, I'm also selling to somebody else.
True.
Now, if my platform is embedded with Britannia, I'm getting my Britannia invoices discounted, but I do have other working capital requirements.
Which may not be AAA.
Which would not be really managed through that platform. So then can I use my balance sheet to upsell and cross-sell to the same vendor? So that was the...
Very interesting.
That was the...
Like a data, you had a data-led play over there.
Correct. Because you're already seeing cash flows, you're seeing transactions, you're seeing everything. So then you can take a lot more secured call in for an unsecured loan.
So a year from your first sale, say June 2018, FY19, where did you land up in terms of top line, bottom line?
So 2019, we were roughly at around 30 odd crores. Then we went to 50. Last year, we closed at about 110.
This is the NBFC plus this together.
Yeah.
Wow.
110 odd crores last year.
And over the journey, you've also been able to convince investors to come in because, we need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Which is selling a B2B SaaS platform in India.
Yeah.
Right. And when we spoke outside, you gave me your word and I was like, I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
But what is it like selling B2B SaaS in India?
It's exhausting. Like I told you that from the corporate side of view, it was, the first sale was 15 months.
Yeah.
So it is tough. And you have to keep reminding yourself that what you're selling is of value.
Yeah.
But it is a process that needs to be handled, right? It does get easier once you know how to go about it. But it is still a long sales cycle. That's a reality. Nobody can change that. So I think you have to be mentally attuned and adjusted to the fact that this is going to take you X amount of time to build.
And I think it's also important to understand that you have to deal with every rejection,
Yeah.
right? And it's very easy to blame the buyer.
Yeah.
It's very easy to blame the product, right? But it's very difficult to blame the process, the sales process.
Yeah.
Right. That maybe there needs to be some editing to that.
Yeah.
Right. That and I think that is where I feel sometimes the founders start losing momentum very quickly, because we're so used to an Instagram kind of, like
Yeah.
swipe a reel and you're kind of done.
Yeah.
But this, like you said, it's a painstaking long process.
It is, right? So the couple of things, right? So both Nirav and my backgrounds have been on the B2B side of things.
which
So
which was helpful. Yeah.
So it's helpful. You have to have a sense of humor. If you don't have a sense of humor, it can get depressing, right? So learn to laugh at yourself.
Tell me a story or two about the sense of humor and how it was helpful.
No, everything. So I mean, like we mentioned, every business has its ups, has its downs.
Yeah.
You celebrate the great times, but you can't get depressed during the bad times. You learn to laugh at yourself, and that helps you move on quicker. It helps everybody around you as well, because if you're sitting and moaning about a loss or during bad times, the atmosphere around you gets depressed,
True.
and that's not going to help anybody. So, but if you learn to deal with it, laugh about it while taking corrective measures, I think it's quicker. It's more fun.
You get there fast.
You can't stop having fun during bad times.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's so critical though, right? Like taking that break.
why would you? If I stop having fun, I would stop coming to work.
Correct.
So you can't run away from a situation, right? So you deal with the situation, but you can deal with it
With a sense of humor.
with a sense of humor. I mean, it's
And in your case, you've seen the worst. You've seen a gun pulled at you. So I
Yeah.
think,
yeah. I mean, see, so I think attitude is a lot to anything that you do in life.
True.
Right? And so, like I told you, we grew up around sports, and sports teaches you how to deal with failure, right? Because you up and down every day, you learn how to adjust yourself. So I think that mindset at least has helped me in my entrepreneurial experience.
I think that mindset needs to be in everyone's entrepreneurial business.
Yeah.
Because it is a sport, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is a sport. Some days you win, some days you lose.
Yeah.
But
And you need to accept that.
correct. And I feel, and I forget who said this, but they say that you're not supposed to be happy as an entrepreneur all the time. You typically are happy only about 5% of the time. Like you're incredibly happy, I would say, right? Usually about 20% of the time you're sort of depressed because things are not going your way.
Yeah.
And 75% is just blah, right? It's just making sure that things are churning. It's a process.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this B2B SaaS thing, it's very, very important for founders and through the medium of this conversation, right? Because you've been through this journey now, 8 years at Credible, 5 years before that, again, a B2B kind of a business. You've been through this journey where you understand, and it's the new founders listening in should understand that this is a process.
It is.
It's gonna take time.
You can't, no matter what you do, yes, you try and be more intelligent about it.
Yeah.
But the process is set, right? And deal with it.
Yeah.
So the way to deal with that is saying that, okay, I will not only talk to one guy, I'll talk to 20 people in one shot. And what will start happening is you'll have, at some point, you'll have conversations at different stages. And then you'll start seeing the dominoes effect happen.
Correct.
But that initial step till the time you don't create that pipeline, and you do, it is a process.
And tell us a little bit about this cold calling, right? And very interesting that I don't think I've really had a conversation, but cold calling for B2B.
Yeah.
And you talked about, I would find 7 dots to connect to somebody.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Because again, for many people, sales came easily because you were in banking.
Right.
But many founders coming right out of college, they've never done sales.
I think that's first lesson that people have to learn as a founder.
Okay.
Is to sell. Because you may have the greatest product, but if you cannot monetize it, there's a fundamental problem over there, right? But yeah, you have to be So the way we went about it is we first used our immediate connects.
Acha.
They may or may not have been in positions, take decisions or whatever. But you had to sell them the concept so that they could then use that network to introduce you to somebody relevant.
Got it.
Or you would say, go to a person saying, okay, I know you know company X. This is what I want to do with company X. So you go with the solution in mind and not just say, give me an introduction to the person over there. This is, so I think that helped a lot from building that pipeline and meeting different people, getting feedback from them, improvising your next pitch. So I think, so those are the few things that we did.
And then working with your brother-in-law can be a very tricky situation and a very complex situation unless you're managing it well, right? And
Right.
what was the strategy? Because family member
Yeah.
plus, in-law, right? Ek hota, it's your own brother. We can both, WWF it out, right?
Yeah.
But when it's your brother-in-law, it can get tricky. How do you guys manage this communication between two very close family members?
Yeah. So it's been brilliant, actually. So before we got into Credible, I think 2 years prior to that, we became really good friends.
Acha.
So it was more of it was a brother-in-law relationship that transited to a friendship more than anything else, which then got into a.
Because I was going to say you got married in 2008 or 9.
Yeah.
And you said you became friends with your brother-in-law in 2015.
Real chatty and real friendly,
I'm just
right?
kidding. I'm just putting the math together.
No, he knows it. Don't worry. So the relationship started off as more friends than as brother-in-laws. But I think to make it work, there are a couple of things that you have to. I mean,
and I think it's very critical because I'm seeing a lot of husband-wife combos.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of brother-brother combos or sibling combos, I would say.
Yeah.
And now I'm also seeing father and son combos.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of them come in our own portfolio now coming up. And I would like to, for you to tell us, like, what's the framework you're using to maintain this both?
Yeah.
Because there is the family relationship is not going to go away.
No.
Right? And there is going to be a work relationship.
Yeah.
And then there is your own personal equation and friendship.
Yeah.
How are you managing all three with the same person?
So we try to simplify it. So I
Please
think,
do.
so family is priority.
Right.
So that's so we're clear that will never get impacted, right?
Okay.
Having said that, you still have a relationship from a work point as well as from a friendship point. I think from a work point, what's worked really well is, first thing is there is no ego. So I think it's easier said than done, but the reality is the moment there is ego in the middle.
And I was going to ask you, how do you create a zero ego situation?
Nothing. You don't make this about yourself. You make it about the organization.
Good.
So I think that's primary, right? Because both of us are trying to do something for the business and not for our
For our own
personal
benefit, correct.
Right? So you remove the ego part of it. You also then agree to disagree, right? Because we may not always agree on the same strategy, but that's okay. You're entitled to disagree. But we've decided that the final call will be one person. So
For a particular division or a
for a
decision?
particular, so I mean, holistically, right? So that simplifies things to a great extent. And so I think these are the few things that we've kept in mind. So just you take the ego out of it. You make sure that at some point that the last decision is then one person's only.
Correct.
You cannot both, because then there'll be no way forward.
Correct.
And that's not good for business either.
And then let's say if you disagree on a decision between you and Neerav, for example, but let's say now you said, Neerav, whatever you're saying, we're going to go with it. Now, what is your responsibility once that decision has been made in the boardroom between two founders?
To execute. I mean,
Even if you were not in agreement with what?
but that's fine.
Correct.
I mean,
And I think that is a critical part, right?
but again, so if we were to do the opposite of this, then you're bringing ego in the middle.
Correct.
So again, you lost us.
I'm just using you as utilizing this conversation as a medium because
Yeah.
I don't not only I think that's the first way how companies start disintegrating, right? Is
Yeah.
when the founders start making, okay, we decide on a decision inside a boardroom.
Yeah.
And I always believe yell as much as you want inside the boardroom, get into each other's grill,
Yeah.
Hold each other's neck, whatever. But once that decision has been made that, what, we're going to do this.
Then eyes
then
close and execute.
That's it.
It's
There
very
is
simple.
there is no rediscussion outside that boardroom.
Yeah.
Or through because in your situation, it's interesting, it's, your wife,
Yeah.
his sister,
Yeah.
and obviously there is a conversation between a husband and a wife that happens every evening.
Yeah.
And a sister and brother have their own relationship.
Absolutely.
Which means that she could be holding
Yeah.
two viewpoints from the same conversation.
No, but like I said, so idea is hold no ego.
Yeah,
You can agree to disagree,
correct.
but once a decision is taken, it's
It's decided.
decided.
Yeah,
you
and I
move
think
forward.
it's a very. And have you guys written this down somewhere, or how did you guys decide?
No,
on
that
this?
was the first understanding when we decided to do this.
Perfect. I was going to ask you, like, was there a moment where this was decided?
No, it was because it is so easy to destroy relationships when ego is involved.
Yeah.
So this was because, like I said, I'm loving the fact that we're working together because I think if you're doing something, might as well do it with family,
Yeah.
right? But you cannot destroy relationship basis this. So how do you make it work? You have clear cut saying, okay, and you have to understand 2 years prior to that, we were great friends, right? So
Yeah.
we understood each other. So it was not
Which
like
was
a
the
new
important
relationship.
part. Yeah.
So it was not like a new relationship.
And why did you
anyway.
choose Nirav, or did Nirav choose you? And I would like to answer as
Yeah.
you as the co-founder, because you could have also gone and found somebody else. But were you looking for a skill set that you saw in him?
No, it was great, right? So we used to sit and have a few drinks, we discuss, laugh, discuss this nonsense, and we say, okay, this spark, and just took off from there. So it was no brain, no overthinking it.
So today, how many people work at Credible?
We have 300 odd people
Wow. Across offices
across India as well as our overseas office, 8 of them.
I think one of the conversations I've had with Ashish Tulsian, who's also sort of
Yeah.
built this, global SaaS business. It started in India. I want you to now take us through this journey that, okay, we got our first invoice, we're now at 50 crore top line, we've got our NBFC license, FY19 has been a great
Yeah.
FY. And now, FY20 has started for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no idea that by the time I hit March 2020,
Yeah.
the world is absolutely going to change,
Yeah.
right? So what was the plans being executed in 2020 before the world changed?
So our idea was still to make sure that we grow our NBFC as well as our corporate SaaS business, right?
Only in India at that time? or-
Only in India.
Okay.
You're too small to even think about. Think about anything else at that point of time. So so that was the plan of 2020. COVID hit. The first thing we was scared about was the lending business, and because you have lent to
Your
the
own
MSME,
NBFC,
yes,
yeah.
right. But that turned out to be really good because, like I mentioned to you, like what we were lending was on self-liquidating thing, right? Because we had escrowed the receivables from the large corporates. So we were able to take our NBFC, decrease it down by 98%,
Wow.
and without a single delayed payment or an NPA or a restructuring. So that proved our thesis in terms of, okay, this works when things are not going well. On the SaaS business, it just took off because corporates suddenly realized that they need to enable supply chain financing for their ecosystem. So we went, like I told you, the volumes just went through the roof with COVID. So COVID was very interesting for us. Obviously, revenues took a hit because the lending business, we
Collapsed.
we brought it down. But again, the team that you had with you was super supportive, right? We all decided to take salary cuts. Nobody even questioned it. Everybody was supportive to make this work. So I think it just brought us much closer as a unit than anything else. And this, you're talking about getting yourself closer when you're not in touch with each other, right? Physically.
Yeah.
You're doing this
Teams
over
calls was just
Teams
starting,
calls. And it's so difficult to motivate people when, everybody's dealing with their own issues.
Correct.
So COVID was really, really, I think overall good for us. It brought us closer as a team. Business was validated because it was stressed during a really tough time, and it was tested positively. So for us, COVID was good.
It was definitely proved the thesis faster than you would have.
Yes, absolutely.
And in the meanwhile, you're also raised, I think, 15 million from Alpha.
Yeah.
Right. And then I think they came back along with Oaks and V-Ocean to do some more investing in October.
Yeah.
So this must have been around the time when you proved the thesis that, hey, this thing works.
Yeah. So Oaks has been with us since day one. So we were discussing Credible with Oaks before we actually founded.
Oh, wow.
Credible. And they were absolutely supportive of us from day one. But we obviously needed to prove out a lot of things before they could invest. And they've been with us since day one. They've been exceedingly supportive of our growth and our growth plans. So that helps when you have an investor who understands where the business is, what we're trying to do.
And I mean, you've had a pretty incredible fundraising journey after that, because you then raised 30 million from Plutus in October 21, which is exactly a year after your last round. And then again, August 22, you raised 9 million, then 10 million from Singapore-based Equentia Natural Resources.
So that's our own. So the 10 million was again promoter-led.
Acha.
So we put in our own capital again.
Wow.
Because we believed it. We believe in our story. So
in overall, a lot of this, I mean, you're almost at about, I would imagine, 50, 60 million raised.
Yeah.
Including your own capital.
No, so we raised a total of about 40 million.
Okay.
Of which 15 would be us.
Okay.
And the rest would be external. You've got Axis Bank, you've got Oaks, and you've got Plutus.
And where do you see the journey from now? Like today, you're sitting, today is June 2025. It's now been 7 years since your first invoice was discounted. Where do you see the journey from now onwards?
So, like we've been discussing, Credible has two parts to it. You have the lending business, which is very India focused, and it's a monolined NBFC, which basically means we do nothing else but working capital. Various products are another working capital construct, but working capital loans per se.
How does somebody get onboarded as a fresh client for that business?
So obviously the three main channels that we onboard our borrowers from. One is the platform. The second one is people find us online, and we have a sales force as well who goes and understands.
So if somebody was watching this, and a lot of founders tune in, maybe even family offices, a lot of family offices tune into this. If they wanted to get a supply chain financing solution, what should they be doing? What size do they need to be at? Right. And
so for our own lending point of view, so we target essentially the mid-market MSMEs as well as the emerging corporates. So all your startups or Series A and above. Those are typically the kind of customer clients who we go against, who are providing goods or services ideally to large corporates. And as long as there's an underlying trade, we can finance that at various stages. So right from purchase order financing to when the goods have been delivered to when an invoice is generated, the entire leg can be covered. But as long as there is an underlying trade, that's it. That's what we need.
And I think that is so. And I'm having this conversation by the way with one of our founders, and I'm trying to explain to him that don't look at the 16, 17 or 15 to 17% sort of a interest rate. If your working capital cycle is only 3 months, it's actually an addition in cost of around 3%.
Yeah.
And then look at it as a cost item, especially if you're financing purchase orders for a working capital cycle of 3 months.
Yeah.
Because it just can't be services. You said goods and services. Right? The goods so how would you explain that? Imagine if I put this founder in front of you And his issue is that, they're going to charge 18% annualized interest.
Right.
And I'm going to use VC money
Right.
instead of working capital money. And I'm like,
Yeah.
listen, that money is at 80% interest.
Yeah.
That does not need to be used to purchase inventory.
So equity is by far the most expensive means of capital.
Yep.
So people need to understand that.
I would love for you to explain that.
Every time you raise equity, you're diluting a part of your ownership.
Yep.
And that's expensive because if you don't value your own ownership, then and especially if you're not using it in the correct form, right? Equity should ideally be used for growth, right? Where you cannot use debt, right? Debt again comes in two parts. You have long-term debt and short-term debt. You ideally should not mix the two. So a lot of people still today use term loans for working capital.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Not only will you have mismatch in cash flows, but even though you're paying a technically lower interest rate, you're still paying a lot more interest.
True.
So it's more expensive than a working capital loan, which is used for an underlying trade. So even though your interest rate may be higher, your overall interest that you pay will be much lower.
Yeah. As a unit economic cost.
Think about it from a pay-per-use basis.
Perfect.
So that's the way we explain.
No, it's so important to match the right financing to the like where I'm watching a lot of these venture debt blow-ups of late.
Yeah.
Right. And that, Builder.ai being the latest one. And one of the things you're realizing is, again, you're financing for having extra runway for an equity round, which is not a confirmed event.
It is not.
Right.
In this day and age, it is not easy to go and raise equity. So, you still have people thinking of business models which use high burn, hoping that in the event somebody will finance it, right? But what happens if they don't?
Yeah.
How can you risk your people who work with you? How can you risk their very existence because you're not building a strong foundation as a business?
Correct.
It blows my mind as to how, it's something that we...
it blows my mind how they sign up for these EMIs.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
that when you're running an EBITDA negative business, right, which means there is no cash to pay off debt. Zero cash to pay off debt, which means the equity is being paid to pay off debt. Right? And how they sign up for these EMIs in the hope that, this additional 2 million will just give me enough time to raise an equity round.
Yeah.
It's not a hedge. I think you're betting the company.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. How not only your company, you're betting on people's lives.
Yeah.
As a founder, you have a responsibility towards your team. How can you?
I think there's a bit of founder. I almost feel like there should probably be a bit of founder, education about using the right sources of capital and matching them correctly.
Yeah.
It's, I think people like yourself who actually do this as a business.
Yeah.
There needs to be a bit more education on this. That hey, use working capital limits or CC limits towards your working capital cycles.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around, right? Don't use your term loan like you said for WC. Yeah. You use term loans for long-term capex investments.
Correct.
You use venture capital for growth.
Yeah.
And I think this stacking, if done properly, builds amazing businesses.
And what people realize is that eventually, if you do this, you're building more value for yourself.
Yeah.
Because then you will have a lot more equity with yourself, not just diluting yourself away.
Like ROE and ROC are two different things.
Yeah. And it got lost in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Those two numbers, people...
Because everything was zero at one point. It didn't matter what you raised. But I do want to get into one more fact that, this SaaS business that was supposed to be India focused, because your lending business is India focused, is now actually global.
Yeah.
Right? I think you're in about 15 odd countries at the moment.
We're in 8 odd countries right now.
Okay.
So we are in the UAE. We are in Singapore, Australia, Indonesia,
there was no actual
Malaysia.
plan, Ram, for you to do all of this.
It was not. It was actually the SaaS segment for the banks was an opportunity that came to us. It was not the original plan.
Wait, when did I'm sorry. When did the SaaS business for the bank start?
So that started about 3 years ago. As the corporate SaaS platform was maturing and more banks were using it, banks became a little more comfortable saying that, okay, can we license the platform to enable supply chain financing for our clients.
Okay.
So that was that was the first time that started, and then we got a bunch of other banks, and then
Was it easier to close a bank compared to how much effort it took to close your first corporate client?
strangely enough, the first few were, uh,
First few banks.
yeah, because it was, like I said, it was an opportunity that came to us.
Correct.
But again, we are back to the same cycle of saying, okay, this is a process. This is what needs to be done. Build a pipeline so that eventually that sales cycle is still about 12 odd months.
Yeah.
It is.
But what I was trying to maybe allude to was it probably got easier because you came in now from a position of strength. versus
Not
an
really.
unknown. It didn't.
Again, getting the first few conversations in is never the problem.
Okay.
It is then managing the process
From there on.
right? Which doesn't change whether you're a large corporate or a bank.
But why did you think that this was a low hanging fruit worth eating?
So-
about
Yeah.
3 years ago, so roughly about 4-5 years into your journey.
Yeah. So what we realized in India is there are very few large corporates above, say, 3,000-4,000 crores in revenue, right? But when you do sign on a bank, they have a lot of these clients already onboarded. So you're seeing a lot more need or requirement from that point of view, right? Because
Interesting.
if you look at their AUM, you're looking at a supply chain financing book, which is an X percentage of the AUM, which is fast more significant than a corporate, right? And therefore, their requirements is a lot more. So it became a larger market for us to address the same problem statement. That's why banks became a very interesting client for us. And then we realized that because as we were working with a lot of multinational banks in India, they had the same requirement in other geographies. So that's how the international expansion started from there. We got our first client in the UAE, followed by Vietnam, Indonesia. Now London is we're live over there. So it's interesting right now.
And so now if I understand the business correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a B2B SaaS business that is for corporates that enables or large corporates that enables their suppliers to get bill discounted using
clients as well as suppliers.
Clients and suppliers. Now, and then there's a global SaaS business that works with banks, helping them do the same thing. And then the third business which does lending in India. Yeah. Right? This is the group.
This is the end. This is what we do.
Did I get it right?
As simple as that.
But did you actually imagine this was actually going to happen? Imagine March 2017, the day Credible started. Did you think this is going to happen in 2025? We'd be sitting here on the 30th floor of Marathon Future X discussing the fact that this is now the business.
Not sure about Marathon Future. But yeah, we were very confident that the problem statement that we set out to address is a reality. Right now, it depended upon execution.
Correct.
Luckily, both of us are slightly more mature than the new age founders. Not to take anything this thing, but so we were very confident in the way we were approaching it. We knew we had taken the tougher journey in terms of saying that we'll approach the large corporates first, which is long credit cycle. Sales cycles, so on and so forth. But we always knew that what we were trying to address is a reality. And if we execute it half decently well, we'll be okay. And that's, luckily.
What I also maybe wanted to talk about was that maybe couldn't envision it.
Yeah.
Right? But as you went along the journey, these kind of opportunities came up.
Absolutely.
Right?
No, there's so many things, right? So
I don't think you might have imagined that banks would suddenly come up and say, hey, we have an issue.
No, absolutely. I think every business evolves.
Yeah.
You have to be sensible enough to identify what works for you and what we should do, and keep evolving the business. The day you stop evolving the business, there's a problem.
So, you've had so many evolutions in the business, right? And which you were just talking about. So then how do you decide as a founder whether a particular evolution is worth betting on?
Yeah.
And how do you ensure that the bet doesn't bet the company?
Yeah. Great question. So we had lots of them.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, if you stop evolving, at some point of time you'll cripple yourself. Um, and the way we go about doing this is, so ideas come, a lot of ideas are thrown at you, right? You see what's happening from a competitor point of view, what are they doing, so on and so forth, and every idea is then thrashed out from a unit economics person basis. Does it make sense for us to do this as a business? Does it fit the credible story? If it fits the credible story, does this segment make sense? Make sense? And we hopefully have so we have a great senior leadership team, and all of us are slightly matured uh, in a way that we can take unemotional calls, saying that, okay, this is not working. We had decided in 6 months we were supposed to be here. We've not reached somewhere close. It's going to take more investment, so on and so forth.
For a particular experiment.
For a particular experiment, right? And if it's not making sense, how quickly can you pull the cord? Because the most dangerous thing is to keep funding it and keep fueling it, and it never being proven out, right? And that's what trains a lot of companies out. And we've done this, we've become really good at it. So we've done this multiple times, but that's the only way to do it. As long as you can detach yourself from a situation and say, okay, hey, there's a great idea, but it's not working because of X, Y, Z.
Correct.
Or you say that, okay, there's a great idea. It did not, it's taking a lot more investment than we initially thought.
Correct.
But it's worth going there because there's something, you can see tangible benefits coming across. So you have to keep monitoring that very, very closely, because the moment you stop monitoring, it slips away with you.
So when you say monitoring, are you talking about monitoring the data? How you
data? So progress, everything, right? So before any project that we decide to take, there's a detailed plan that has come out monthly, saying that, okay, this month we'll be here, and that is monitored very, very closely. And then
it's data led.
It is.
And I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit more, because it's how important is it for you and Nirav and maybe even the senior leadership involved?
Yeah.
How often do you review the data, like company wide, AOP versus MIS, and other metrics that you're tracking?
Yeah.
And what are the metrics you're tracking?
Data is reviewed company wide every month, without fail. You have certain MISs which are daily. There are some which are weekly, fortnightly, so on and so forth. So every part of the business is monitored. Numbers don't lie.
Thank you.
Right? You have gut feel, which is great, but eventually numbers
are numbers.
Numbers are numbers.
You either have numbers or a great story.
There's nothing you can, there's nothing, that's reality, right? So we monitor that like hawks. Unit economics is something that for us is very, very important. Are you making money for everything that you're selling?
Yeah.
Right? And how do you maximize unit economics? Right? So I think that is something that is ingrained into the company. So that helps us with a lot of decision making.
And do you have systems created for it, or is it okay?
No, so it's from day one. So normally what happens is a lot of companies, they arrive at stage 2.
Yeah.
We made sure it was there before we even started.
Correct.
So this is what we're going to monitor. This is the frequency of it. So you have data lakes, you have everything. You have people who are only monitoring performance. Period. And that helps a lot.
And has there been a situation where you look at the same data set and have two different opinions on it, which were opposite? Like you could look at the same number and say, hey, this shows growth, but you're saying, no, this doesn't agree with what we had agreed to.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that kind of?
Again, you monitor the pros and cons. You discuss it out as a team. Like I said, we have a really strong senior leadership team. Comes with great experience. That helps. You keep discussing it out. always discuss everything out.
Yeah.
Uh, there is no harm in discussing.
Absolutely not. And I think what I like is that, like you said, there are MISs
Yeah.
which are daily,
Yeah.
weekly, and monthly.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not monitoring things, and I feel founders need to learn this skill, that you have to monitor the data daily. Some
Yeah.
data daily, right? Some
Correct.
data weekly and some data monthly, but you have to monitor the data,
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise you're just flying by the seat of your pants. And
There's only
that's
so much gut will.
correct.
I mean, you have numbers do not lie.
And but I find, I don't even think this is just an India specific issue, because globally we've seen the same thing. Founders just don't love looking at their numbers, right? Have you figured out why that is? Because you deal with a lot of founders yourself.
So what I've realized is it's really easy to work on an Excel sheet.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you great 5-year projections, but when you really monitor it,
When you have to then say that this is the AOP. This is not.
so I have a feeling that has something to because you're overly aggressive when you're making projections, and it's easy to do, right? It's drag, and I think, but you see a lot more experienced entrepreneurs not doing this because they understand what reality is.
Yep.
And what can be done vis-a-vis what can happen.
No, very, very interesting. I think the conversation that I'm getting from here today, Ram, is that you have a very calm leadership between Nirav and yourself, and that
Right.
probably comes also because of the experiences you've had before,
Right.
And your own entrepreneurial journey. We obviously haven't gone to Nirav's yet, but
Yeah.
in a future episode, I'd love to have him here.
His journey is actually very, very interesting. You'll have a great conversation.
And I realized that because you've been through a specific situation at Premier, and obviously you saw the great financial crisis, you've
Yeah.
seen, and then you also saw the turmoil that 2020 did. You've just become calm with the process. That things are all going to be in a process. Nothing dies tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? And Rome wasn't built in a day.
Rome wasn't built in
Neither
a
was it
day.
burnt in a day. So let's be
Correct.
right. Let's be fair. But I really enjoyed the way that you've evolved this business, right? And you really have gone and said, okay, I was solving this problem, but then I realized that okay, there's another problem that is getting solved over here. So let's start building a product or a unit or a company for this. But what I really loved was the fact that when you applied for your NBFC license the day you started,
Yeah.
which meant that you had the foundations already ready
Yeah.
by the time scale came into being. It wasn't like, and I've seen this before, that I have built a SaaS business first,
Yeah.
and now I realize I need to have financing too. So
That's
my
what you're seeing today.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of.
And if you didn't have an NBFC license today, right, you could have built this perfect position,
Yeah.
but you didn't have a lending arm,
Yeah.
right, to deal with. So otherwise, this, and there are some, I was just going through these fairly incredible numbers, right? 11 billion in working capital annually,
Yeah.
right? 11 billion is enabled through Credible, right? 175 corporate clients, 100 plus global financial institutions, 3.5 lakh, that's 350K small businesses, and it's over a 500% year-on-year growth, right? With I think overall now you're at 90, just under 20 billion has been lent to the platform, right? Did these numbers even come to your mind? Were they in a whiteboard somewhere when you started? Like,
No, I'm still. No, it doesn't. It's wild, right? It's amazing. That's so cool.
let's now crystal gaze a little bit, okay?
Right.
So let's talk about 5 years from now.
Yeah.
It would be, or rather, let's say 2 years from now, 2027 would be a 10-year anniversary for
Yeah.
you, right? March of 27. Where do you see the business there? And then let's say where do you see the business 5 years from now?
So we believe we will be still a working capital trade finance business,
Okay.
right? Enablers, right? We believe the SaaS banking SaaS platform will go. I think the next target markets are obviously the US, which is currently untapped from us, as well as Latin America. I think they're huge markets for us to expose ourselves over there. I think next 2 years is basically to ensure we execute on the banking SaaS and get as many clients onboarded and deliver excellence. On the AUM, we believe we should be at least 3 times where we are today.
Like annual disbursal rate of around 35 billion.
So from our NBFC, I think those are the immediate plans. 5 years is an explanation of this, but
Oh, wonderful, Ram. I really enjoyed the evolution conversation, right? And again, it reminds me of the late Steve Jobs speech, right? That things start making sense looking backwards, more than looking forwards, right? And if you hadn't, I think in many ways, I'm just not even talking about the credible journey. I'm just talking about the overall journey, right? If you hadn't had your, if you hadn't done your internships in banking,
strangely enough, I've forgotten. I forgot. It's been so while back. I forgot what I'd done earlier. So today, when I was actually talking, I was like, "Oh yeah, okay."
and exactly right. Do you even remember some of the things your worldview today could have been shaped by an internship you did 22 years ago, right? Or the fact that you were part of a fledgling, investment banking role, and or the fact that you were part of Centrum, right? And then obviously Centrum, which is now listed, and then you had your own journey. All of these things added to where you are today, and now it all makes sense today. I'm sure when people speak to you, they're like, "Oh, I always knew." We're like, no, I don't think I knew, right? That kuch to karega types, right? So I know I really enjoyed the conversation, but is there anything you want to say last before we get into rapid fire? Because this is the part of the conversation I don't think you have any idea what I'm going to ask.
No.
So okay, great. So we're going to do a quick rapid fire round. This is customary at the My Talks. This is unscripted. I have a few questions that I have put down, and whatever first comes to mind, you have to answer that.
I'm very bad at this.
I have been told, right? So, but that getting said, I'm just whatever first comes to mind, right? And maybe there's a tangent we'll get into, or maybe not. We're just gonna have some fun with this. All right? Are we ready? Do you need a sip of water or something?
Really, is that intensive?
What's the first thing you touch when you wake up in the morning?
Unfortunately, my phone.
Your phone. Okay. One app you're obsessed with in your phone?
YouTube Music.
YouTube Music. Okay. What do you normally listen to?
Typically 80s and 90s rock.
Okay.
Just to start off with.
What's the best book you've read this year?
I read more The Economist, and that's pretty much all my reading that happens over there.
Okay. The Economist.
Yeah.
Perfect. What's one productivity hack that you've been using?
Breathe.
Tell us more about this.
You have people coming to you with all sorts of stressed out situations.
Yeah.
Like, take a step back. Breathe. Okay, now let's go.
Okay. If not for Credible, what would you be doing right now?
I think teaching.
Wow, teaching.
I've been told I can simplify stuff. So I think that helps.
You simplified a very incredible journey into compartmentalized.
And I kind of enjoy that entire process.
Let's talk about what's your one prediction for SME finance? Where do you think it's headed?
It needs to be done exceedingly carefully. The opportunities obviously are large. But if you cannot throw money at the problem.
Okay.
Lending is easy to give money, but collecting is the key, right? So you have to do it sensibly. Otherwise, you can end up hurting.
Your favorite, superhero? Superman. Why Superman? Wow, mostly the answers have been Batman or Iron Man. Although I always thought that when I said superhuman, people literally should say Superman, right? He's really Superman. But go ahead. Why Superman?
He's Superman. He can fly. He can see through things.
He can hear things.
He can hear things. It's brilliant.
and he can slice buildings. I don't think any of the other guys can do that.
Seriously, I mean, how can you even see anybody else?
No, great. I think I'll take this last one. How do you deal with regret?
By not really having one.
Okay.
Like I said, have a sense of humor. Laugh at yourself. It's okay. And that passes through.
You'll breathe.
Seriously. If you laugh, oh my God, I screwed up. I should have done that. You laugh it out.
Like I said, Ram, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise.
And I love the way this business has evolved, right? And I think these are the sort of businesses that really, inspire maybe investors like us, because the journey that really is the fun part.
Yeah.
We'll make money, all that stuff. See,
Yeah.
we'll make money. That's one part.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very small part of what gets you excited. But it's having journeys like this, right?
It's life's a journey, not a destination. So,
Correct. And I love the fact that, just don't know. Like, yes, you start by saying, okay, I'm going to go north.
Yeah.
But I don't know, am I going to reach Delhi? Am I going to keep running north all the way up, into all across China? Where am I going to land up?
Correct.
I just don't know that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that really is the message that I take from today. And I love the fact that it's all been data led. Your message here is to any founder, and maybe more so in your business, because all about numbers, right?
Yeah.
But I think any business needs to be brought down into numbers.
Just simplify stuff. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Any final words for the audience, founders that are listening in before we close for today?
At least for founders, I think people tend to overcomplicate stuff because people believe, like I've come across many founders who come up with a very complicated way of thinking because they believe that sounds sexier. But the reality is, if you keep it simple, you'll be able to do a lot more.
Yeah.
See, it's easier to multiply a number by 3 instead of pi. Keep it simple.
Love that. It's easier to multiply a number by 3 instead of pi. I think I'm going to use that. We're gonna have this. We're gonna have this somewhere. Right?
I know where I heard it. It's not my review.
We'll just say ChatGPT told us. Thank you so much once again. To everybody listening in, great conversation with Ram. And I would encourage everyone to just remember that it literally is the journey. It is not the destination. Success never has been a destination. And the fact that, numbers, it's all about the numbers, to numerically analyze every single decision, numerically analyze every single opportunity, and to remember sometimes you just have to breathe. Thank you so much.